clicking on my video. This is my video about sleep hacks. I've spent some time studying the issue of sleep and how to improve it and trying various things out, experimenting with different molecules to see what impact they have on me. Now, they may have a similar effect on other people, they may not. I've also come to certain conclusions where I think some of the conventional wisdom is wrong. But if you find it useful, then great. If you have no problem with sleep, you may not bother watching this. If you have a problem with sleep, it may be worth watching it. I have got a very short TLDR after the disclaimer, and then I go into a bit more detail about the different aspects of sleep. So thank you for clicking on the video, and remember, if you want to do anything in this, talk first to your healthcare professional. So first we move on to the disclaimer. I'm not medically qualified. I have a degree in physics but not medicine. I have been a member of parliament, but that's not necessarily relevant to any of this. Maybe I'm good at droning on in speeches and making people go to sleep. I am a tech entrepreneur and I am a musician, but I'm not a doctor, and nothing in this is medical advice. It's educational. I've studied the issue to improve my own health, particularly sleep, and I produced the video to give people information, some of which I think is completely new from my own experiences. But my channel is not monetized and I'm not sponsored. And if you want to do anything, it's worth talking it through with a healthcare professional. So moving on to TLDR. Too long, didn't read. Well, basic points about sleep. First, sort out sleep hygiene. If you don't know what it is, I'm going to explain that soon. Secondly, sort out your diet and supplements, vitamin D, magnesium, etc. Alcohol is a double-edged sword. It can help at times, but it will also hinder, and relying on it to sleep is not a good idea. If you wake up in the middle of the night, this is a new one, not because of booze, because if you wake up because of booze, you're just going to be awake for 3 or 4 hours. Try an aspirin. Its effects are very complex, which I explain in a bit, and they last more than 1 day. Ketones, the ketonic diet, and if you don't know what that is, I will explain a little bit later, can have an effect on sleeping if in low quantities, but hypoglycemia can wake you up. So it's again a double-edged sword. Melatonin is good for maintaining sleep, but has a short half-life, and should not be taken before going to bed. These are my views. Now, there are 3 main factors in people sleeping. One is the activity of neurons, which is to what extent you're thinking about things in part. The balance between gamma-aminobutyric acid, GABA, and glutamate. Glutamate is an excitatory chemical. It sort of excites your neurons, and GABA calms them down. And things that help GABA, such as melatonin, which helps GABA, help to calm things down. Similarly, ketones help GABA and help to calm things down. But if you've got lots of energy, lots of glucose floating around, or potentially, again, ketones, that can help glutamate. It can excite your neurons, and particularly things like menaquinones can excite the neurons. Sleep pressure is also adenosine. It's how when you're awake, you generate adenosine, you generate sleep pressure. When you get a lot of adenosine around, it makes you feel really tired. And as you sleep, that's cleared. So sleep pressure makes people sleep. And then you've got the cortisol awakening response. And cortisol and the HPA axis, this which is where meditation can help. That can again wake you up and make you. The cortisol awakening response is something which basically, when you're in the morning, it gets you going, and you then awake for the day. The difficulty, of course, is if you get that at 4 o'clock in the morning, at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's not very helpful. And there are people who get that. So anyway, so those are the 3 main factors for sleep. And now I'll go into different aspects to look at those and how they're affected by various things. So sleep hygiene and strategy. This is always the first thing to do if you've got a sleep issue, and you should always try and maintain it. And there are things in your eyes, you've got rods and cones, but you also have the IPRGCs, the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. And those are cells that are there to design to know when it's daytime and when it's nighttime. And they are particularly sensitive to blue light, particularly the blue light you find in computers and phones and things like that. But they emphasize the daily cycle, the circadian cycle, with bright sunlight in the morning, and then it goes dark at night. So one thing you need to do when you want to sleep well is to keep your bedroom dark. Another thing is, when you go to sleep, your body cools down. So if it's too warm, you don't sleep. So try and make sure that your body can cool down. A heavy duvet can help to sleep, just because it's a heavy blanket that makes you feel comfortable. Keeping things quiet is of course important, but light's actually more important. And you should try and have some regular sleep times even at the weekend. So you should try and have a weekly cycle where you wake and sleep at the same times, notwithstanding the fact that you can sleep in. It then just causes confusion. If you are worrying about things in the middle of the night that's keeping you awake, write them down, because that way it puts some of the worry aside, and that's again part of the issue. Avoid using booze or sleeping pills to get to sleep. Booze is quite good at getting you to sleep, but again it wakes you up in the middle of the night. Avoid caffeine in the evening. Caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours. That is, it takes 6 hours to get rid of it, half of it from your system, and it impacts on the adenosine system. So it prevents the tiredness making you go to sleep. It can be useful, but it's not very good at night. So some people are less sensitive to it and they can drink as much coffee as they want. But if you're somebody who's sensitive to it, drink it in the morning, stop at lunchtime. Definitely don't drink it in the evening. Meditation, breathing exercises, that sort of thing, those can affect the HPA axis, which generates cortisol and keeps you awake. So that's a good mechanism. Breathing exercises can be a good thing to get you back to sleep. There's lots of things on the internet about breathing exercises. The main thing is breathe deeply and hold the breath a bit, and then breathe very, very slowly out. Focus on your breathing, not about things you're worrying about. If you really want to improve your sleep, keep records. You can use a Fitbit or an Apple Watch. They're not perfect, but if you track what you're doing and what works, then you know what's working. Ideally, don't nap, because if you nap, it reduces the sleep pressure and you don't sleep as well as night. But if you do nap, nap around about lunchtime, not in like 5 o'clock, because if you nap at 5 o'clock, it really will damage your sleep. So there's some a summary of quick sleep hygiene suggestions. Worth trying them all. Diet and supplements. I've done a special video about vitamin D, which I think is worth looking at. But you know, definitely 2,000 to 4,000 IU per day, but take it in the morning because you process it during the day, and if it's unprocessed it keeps you awake. So this is the problem with a lot of these things. They have good points and bad points, and with vitamin D, if you take it in the morning, it's much better for sleep. Magnesium, there's lots of salts of magnesium: malate, citrate, threonate, glycinate, and you've got to be careful to make sure, if you're going, I would aim to take the RDA in the supplement, even though you're getting it in your diet as well. But not necessarily threonate. It can have some odd effects, but whichever way. But look at the elemental value. The weight of the actual supplement, it isn't the weight of magnesium. It's the weight of the magnesium plus the salt malate, so magnesium malate, magnesium citrate, and their molecular weights vary. And I will do a video going into the details of this at some stage. But try and get the right amount of magnesium. There are other things: 5-HTP. Even kiwi skins, not the fruit itself necessarily. Tart cherry juice is thought to work well. Chamomile, L-theanine, GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid. Again, because of the homeostatic systems of the body, if you can get it past the blood-brain barrier, and there's doubts as to whether you can, any effect is likely to be temporary, but it's worth a shot. Valerian, maybe. There's been studies into valerian. Some have found it works, some have found it doesn't work. A good stack, but be careful. Some things make sleep harder. One of the things that makes sleep harder is vitamin K2, particularly MK7. Again, I'll do another video about vitamin K2 at some stage, but MK7 particularly rather than MK4 provides an extra electron transport for the mitochondria, which are your energy parts of the cells, the powerhouse as people call it, where it generates energy. And with that, you're getting more energy floating around the system, more energy on neurons. Your neurons are more active, and therefore it's more balanced towards glutamate, more active. And this you can find in some cheeses, not all cheeses, particularly hard cheeses. So be careful about that. I found resveratrol has a similar effect to NAD boosters. Again, that sort of vitamin B3 type things. They also can then excite your neurons and make sleep harder, although there can be other good reasons for taking them as well. So this is one of these complicated things where there are good points and there are bad points, and you have to work out exactly where you go with all of that. So alcohol is quite interesting. Alcohol is what's called GABAergic initially. That is, it will, if you don't drink it too often, help you go to sleep, as it makes your neurons calm down. But once it's processed, there is what's called an alcohol rebound, where it actually makes you even more awake. And that rebound can last a few hours, maybe 3 or 4 hours. It will vary from person to person. One thing you should be careful about is if you drink alcohol every night, that will wear out the sensitivity to alcohol, so it won't get you to sleep. So if you drink alcohol once in every 3 nights, it will probably drop you straight off to sleep, but it might wake you up in the middle of the night. Although if you go sufficiently drunk, you can actually find that you sleep through because you haven't managed to process the alcohol. But there's other problems with that, being drunk in the morning and being particularly ill. There is an interesting question, of course, if you go to bed sober, whether you can use alcohol to undermine the sort of cortisol awakening responses. I'm going to do some experiments with that, but I haven't done it yet. I prepared myself a nice bottle of port to drink in the middle of the night to see if that'll help me deal with middle insomnia, but I haven't. I've experimented with so many different things. I haven't tried that one yet. Melatonin can get you back to sleep even with an alcohol rebound, but it takes quite a bit more. And you have to be quite tired to do it, so it's best to avoid the alcohol rebound, really, because that's not a good thing for sleep. But as I said, that's again a double-edged sword is alcohol. And then you have the ketones. Now, ketones are GABAergic. That means they encourage the cells to calm down. And there are various ways you can get ketone bodies in your system. Ketones are generated when you're not processing glucose, so when you haven't got carbohydrates being digested by the body. Ketones are, there are 3 different ketones that are then passed around the body to generate energy or provide energy to cells. And you can become ketonic by avoiding carbs and having a diet which is very short on carbohydrates, so it concentrates and it chews up fat rather than ketones. You can also take raspberry ketone, caprylic acid, the medium chain triglycerides, and ketone salts and the ketone ester. Don't take them all at once. Ketone ester has a disadvantage of being more expensive than malt whiskey, but my personal experience is that the ketone ester is quite effective, and I find that 5 millilitres of ketone ester is quite helpful for creating a temporary GABAergic effect, but without the rebound that you get from alcohol. But again, it's providing energy, so too much of it can actually provide too much energy and actually incite things. But at the same time, if you're taking vitamin K2 and running your metabolism on hot, as I call it, where there's a lot more energy for the metabolism, ketone ester can actually assist to keep things calm, so you actually manage to sleep where you wouldn't otherwise sleep. That's for me. It may not apply to other people. It will apply to some people. So that's ketones. And then we have melatonin, and melatonin, I've done a video on melatonin, and that's generated by the pineal gland on the command of the suprachiasmatic nucleus. But that itself is inhibited by melatonin in the blood, serum melatonin. But the melatonin is injected primarily by the pineal gland to the cerebral spinal fluid, the part, just the fluid around the brain. That's an important point, and it needs a lot more melatonin there to get you to sleep than is necessary in the blood. So if you want to take it during the night, it can help for keeping you asleep and getting sleep maintenance, possibly with aspirin for returning to sleep during a cortisol awakening. It has a 30-minute serum half-life. I'm not sure if it gets into the brain, it probably has a bit longer. I don't know how it's metabolized in the brain, but in the blood it's metabolized in 30 minutes. If you take it before bed, it's like to reduce your own. This is one of my non-conventional wisdom things, that I think if you take it beforehand, it reduces what you generate in the pineal gland, which is an issue because it has other health benefits. There are options for taking industrial quantities of 200 milligrams and 400 milligrams, and it potentially has other health benefits. Younger people produce more melatonin, and there's an interesting question as whether one of the reasons why younger people's cells are more healthy is they produce more melatonin. Talk carefully to a healthcare professional about it, and this one, like vitamin D, is a hormone, so it has quite a bit of an effect. And then we come to aspirin, which is very interesting. Aspirin is what's called a cyclooxygenase 1 inhibitor, sometimes known as COX-1. And COX-1 is an enzyme that enables production of various other things. And various other things include melatonin, cortisol, and adenosine, which have interesting effects on sleep, because melatonin basically puts you to sleep, cortisol helps in waking you up, and adenosine gives you sleep pressure. So adenosine plus melatonin equals sleep. So obviously, if you've got aspirin in your body, which is what happens with aspirin, it has a short half-life. So the aspirin disappears with a half-life of 20 minutes. But it knocks out this enzyme, cyclooxygenase 1, that your body then gradually rebuilds. So although aspirin's half-life is very short, its effects last 36 hours on a linear basis. So gradually over the 36 hours, your body rebuilds its COX-1 levels. And hence, what you can do, if you're in middle insomnia, because the cortisol's waking up, and you take aspirin, it can put you back to sleep or help you get back to sleep. But what you will then find is the next night you'll have a problem getting to sleep, but you won't be tired during the day. And I wouldn't take aspirin the next night, because then it gets a bit of a mess. And then, so aspirin, if you're using it for managing that middle insomnia, is one for taking every other day, not every day. But it has that interesting double-edged sword. It makes you less tired, so you feel better because of less adenosine. But when it goes to bed, because you've got less tired and you've got less melatonin, then it causes a problem getting to sleep. But again, during the night, it will still undermine the cortisol production, so the awakening pressure won't be there as much necessarily as well. But you still won't have had the same adenosine to keep you asleep. So it's one to experiment with, and also to be extremely careful as to how much to take, because obviously the more you take, the more COX-1 it knocks out. The research on the 36 hours is quite well done. I think it was in the 1970s that this particular research was done. But it is in a sense, aspirin is one of the examples of something which shows how complicated the sleep process is. But again, it's something that can be useful, and obviously middle insomnia, for those people who have it, and I have it from time to time, is a real pain. So having something that will do something about it, even if you can't use it every day, is quite helpful. So thank you for watching the video.